of the works that I think are more interesting, and also they kind of say more about things that I've been working with. So let's start with this one. This I showed at Stephen Friedman Gallery in '97, and I think this is kind of the first site-specific project I did, and it was very, very simple. And just marble powder on the floor, trying to recreate the drawing, the pattern of the floor, like this herringbone pattern. This is a piece that I presented in São Paulo Biennial in '98. And this, you can see the grid again. At this point I was trying to work with, I think it was one of the first pieces that I tried to work with visitors. So this is a room that was filled up with adhesive plastic and dirt from my house. So everything was covered, walls and floor, with dirt, and it's kind of hard to explain. But anyhow, people could enter this room, so that was about having a private dirt and a public one, and it was a sort of diary too, and I think this piece is kind of emblematic for me, because it has a lot of elements that I work with today until now. So that was the first bubble film I did, because in this exhibition there's the kind of a new version, but totally different. So that was a giant bubble, actually a lot of bubbles that were edited, like here, and it was crossing this tropical landscape, and the bubble would never burst, like the one here. But this one was shot black and white Super 8. I did in collaboration with Guimarães, and we worked together for the film here. I think this was one of the first pieces I started working with language, and I did this kind of Scrabble game made out of oranges, dehydrated orange, and the letters are carved on the peel of the oranges. I hope you understand. And people could play with those words and build words. And I've been working with this Scrabble game on different occasions. This is one of, I think, the first maps I did, and I like this piece very much because, first of all, I didn't do anything. I just left this rice paper inside this crate, and these nails or slugs, right? They have house. So the slugs were eating the paper, and in the end there was this kind of cartography aspect. So it's very abstract, but it's just eating paper. But I was trying to control the thing in a way that we would recognize as a cartography. So that was, I think, one of the very first pieces that I dealt with it. And this picture was shot at the Walker Art Center, and I met Richard over there at this time. So this is also at the Walker, and the curator was
Kenny.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is also, you can see the circles on the floor. It's also shown here. And the base is with coconut soap mixed with water. So at that time I was still thinking about dirtiness and cleanliness and all those kind of things, and also the participation of the visitors. And on the wall what you see is like an alphabet made out of different 26 different spices from A to Z, so saffron, black pepper, in different languages. And you will see this piece will, in the end of this presentation, you will see how it developed in another show. So this is saffron. This is Zaptar, I think. This is so I started being interested on the relationship of, between language and food, and this idea of the mouth having a double function, which is speaking and eating. So I still like this idea, and I keep working with this. And this was a project we did. I did in São Paulo first, and for the opening at the new museum, instead of doing like a regular normal dinner, we decided to do this project, and I was really happy to be able to remake it again. And it's about this shopping list that I found in a supermarket in Frankfurt, and all those it's a list of food stuff, ingredients, right? And so the project consists of having two chefs, and they have the same list of ingredients, and they have to do whatever they want to do. It's like the idea is like if they had it's like a translation. They have something, and then they develop two different things in the end. And in São Paulo, you can see even color-wise, it was totally different. So it's and in New York was very interesting too. The two chefs developed two completely different things. This is just one piece from a show I did in this museum in Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais, Brazil, where I live. It's a Nehemiah's building, very, very beautiful. Used to be a casino. And there's this just one simple piece. It's a site-specific one. It's a measuring tape that would measure the height of people. This piece I showed in St. Louis in 2004, and it was part of the show at the New Museum, but Mildred and I decided to not include this piece because it was shown before. It's those wishes that in this church in Bahia, it's a traditional thing in Brazil. I don't know if you know about this, but in Bahia you have all those ribbons that comes written Nosso Senhor do Bonfim, which is the name of the church, the saint. And you ask for a wish, and then you tie this ribbon in your wrist and make 3 knots and ask, 3 wishes actually. And when it falls apart, your wishes will be realized. So I started asking friends for their wishes. So we started with like 40 wishes, and then I printed on the same kind of material, ribbons, and so it goes like this, as it goes on the wall like this, and people are welcome to take away how many good wishes they have. And they started putting pieces of paper on the wall with their own wishes. So now I have this big collection of more than 2,000 wishes from everywhere, and every time I change. So for the new museum, I had wishes that came from the Carnegie International, so, and from the new museum. So the next venue will have the wishes from the new museum. So it goes like this, and it spreads around. So here are some of the wishes. And in the end, I think it's interesting. I find that it's that you have individual wishes, but when you have like 1,000 of them, you have a kind of portrait of a collective, many people think about the same wishes. This is a piece I showed at the Venice Biennial, and it was an exhibition curated by Daniel Birnbaum and Francesco Bonami. It was called, I can't remember the date, or Delays and Revolutions. And I did this, it was balls, all kinds of balls, disguised into flags, and there were no intentions, I mean, in terms of size and country. It was not political in this direction, but for me it was more like having this impossible cartography of, I don't know, Japan being next to Mexico, or just because of the representation of the flags. And people could go around this thing and change the world in a way, the way they wanted to. I put this slide here just to try to explain how this Carioca project came. There's a wall painting in the show which is about this character. Carioca was this cartoon, this comic book character created by Walt Disney in the 40s. Walt Disney came to Latin America and he created 3 different characters, one for Brazil, one for Argentina, and one for Mexico. And the animal that would represent Brazil was this parrot, and he was a kind of very stereotyped guy from Rio, lazy, doesn't like working, I don't know, those kind of things like samba and football. And he, funny enough, he's well known in Brazil, although he was created for the American audience. I was very surprised when I came to St. Louis in 2004, and I was asking people around if they knew about Carioca, and people like from my age, and nobody never heard about him. So I was kind of feeling sorry for him, but you know, he's really he belongs to our hearts in a way. So I did a trilogy with him, and in St. Louis I did a project with teenager, students, and I asked them to recreate the character since they didn't know which animal. So I asked them to think of an animal that would represent Brazil. It was interesting because they were thinking, they were like from polar bears to parrots, ducks, all kinds of animals. They were trying to think of Brazil, but they would represent themselves too. So I did an animation film, it's not here. But before the animation, I started erasing I was into the communication thing. So I erased everything, all the characters and everything, and it became an abstract painting. So I did a series, different stories where I erased everything. I painted the top of the original comic book, and the only thing you would have left would be the title of the stories that are kind of fun, like how to have lunch for free or football, whatever. The character was still on the title. And then I thought I had erased it too much, so I wanted to bring the story back. So I decided to do the wall paintings where people could interact with. And I think in terms of interaction, this is a kind of the most successful piece, I think. The wishes works, well, the ribbons works too, but this is it's, first of all, it lasts, it can, many people can write and erase and the piece will be still there, alive. And it's just giving a platform to people to interact with, but they, one visitor interact with the other visitors, and I'm just giving something for a more multiple way of interaction. So I think this is interesting. So this piece, not this exact one, but some 2 similar stories are on the exhibition. This is the first piece I started work with sound, and usually I work with these 2 musicians from Brazil called Rodrigo, and this floor, it's based on the Japanese floor that exists in Japan. I saw in Kyoto. It's called the Nightingale floor, and I think it's a kind of a primitive alarm floor. That's the way I call it. It stays, in front of the temples, and when you step on it, it makes a noise of a bird, nightingale. So people would know, that somebody or somebody was entering the temple. So I asked the Ogrivo to develop some musical instruments, and usually they work with very banal stuff, like you can see a cup, a plastic cup. So when you step on the wooden board, this metal stick moves on the surface of things and makes some noise. So in a way, for me, it's a way of it's a sound. It's a way of writing with sounds. I don't know how to explain this, but just you go around and you make your own music. This is a piece I showed in the Venice Biennial, curated by Rosa Martinez, and it's a piece based on, well, kind of based on this dialogue written, not written, by Machado de Assis, who is a writer from the 19th century in Brazil. And he wrote this dialogue, which I find fantastic. It's only full stops. So what I did, I was working with typewriters, and I replaced the letters for full stops. So whenever you knew you would write, I mean, the typewriter from the outside was the same. It's just that when we would type your name, you would have only full dots. So I thought I was trying to subvert language and having kind of those secret messages on the wall, but for my surprise, the visitors subverted my subversion and they started making drawings, writing messages with full stops, like in a very creative way, like this is the result of the things they would say. And I was very impressed also about the amount of time they would spend in a typewriter. And typewriter is something that is kind of obsolete. Nobody knows how to use this thing anymore. So it's really, I find really incredible. And when you put them together, you know, after the Venice Biennial, I made a selection of 100 of them, or not, 140 drawings. And it's the same thing with the ribbons. You can see like this collective way of thinking. It repeats. It's a pattern that repeats. Some people just write their names, or love things, or landscapes. That's a film I did in collaboration with Carl Manes. If it's not Carl, it's my brother, so this is collaboration with Carl, and it's about those ants, all different kinds of ants. They carry confetti. It starts with few confetti, and then it goes increasing, and in the end they carry all the confettis inside their nests. And the soundtrack was composed by Rivane. That was an installation I showed at the Gallery in New York, and it has to do, of course, a lot with this confetti piece. And I think it was, I was working with chance in different pieces, but I think this one I really wanted to bring this thing up. So it was a moving painting in a way, with all those circles. There's let me see if I have an image. So you can see that there were fans above the ceiling, so those circles would move around, and eventually they would fall through 4 holes that I had on the ceiling, and so they would kind of mirror when they fall on the floor, they kind of mirror the situation up there, and when the visitors cross the space, they kind of move the circles on the floor. But it's just like one of the pieces that I couldn't really control. Pangea Diaries I showed at the Carnegie International, and this is a carpaccio beef that shows the change of the tectonic plaques from billions of years, and it's carpaccio and ends. So it seems that the ants are taking care of the world in a way. It's a stop motion animation. So this is, then I did a second piece again with fans on top of the ceiling, but this gray thing is styrofoam balls. I wanted to bring, after working with maps in a more, recognized way, I wanted to have a map abstract again. So that was the only thing would transform this whole thing in a map was the grid, and that intrigues me. That it's very efficient how they try to create systems like mapping or the alphabet or the calendars, and how efficient are those systems. So you could recognize this abstract moving painting as a map just because of the grid, I think. That was also shown in the Boeing Museum. So it keeps moving. It's very slow, but those little balls, they migrate and change the borders. I wanted to talk about how the world is changing in terms of climate and things. This was a kind of complex show that I did at South London Gallery, and sometimes I work with the space of a gallery, and the South London, the high ceiling was very high, like 6 meters. So the first thing I wanted to do was to divide the gallery into different spaces. So we created this wooden structure that it could have 2 floors, and so this is the lower part, the lower floor, and so some films and another sound piece was there, and on the second floor, because there was no walls, I did this piece that I was drilling holes on the wall, and it was called Suspension Point. It was kind of dividing the space into 2, but had to do with language. That was the axis. This piece is also here in the show. It's called the Rivane Moons, and it's a perforated 16mm film. And with the dust that came out from the holes, I built this sort of landscape that had connection with the Rivane film underneath. And that was the show I presented now in between New York and here. I had this show at the Kunsthalle, which is a super gigantic space. I was kind of totally somewhere else. So I did this site-specific project, and it has a lot to do with the eatable alphabet that I showed at the Walker. Those are polycarbonate sheets, I don't know how you say this. Usually they use for make ceilings, so they have kind of channels, and I was pouring different kinds of spices. The exhibition had to do with the food market and food and alphabet, and it was kind of complex, but anyhow, each of those colors is a different spice. And this is like a 40 meters long corridor. It was really a huge thing. And you could go under it, and you could also climb a staircase and see the piece and the outside. And it was stretched with steel cables. This was also in the show. It's a film I did in collaboration with my brother, who is a neuroscientist. And it's a very simple film. It has to do a lot about semantics and languages. This part is listening to a football, a soccer game, which is actually Germany and Brazil playing the World Cup in 2002, where Brazil won. So it's just my brother lives in Germany, so he has this kind of sentimental I don't know, problem. And so the parrot was eating punctuation marks, right? And so whenever he picks up one punctuation marks, the guy who is narrating, narrating the soccer game, something happens to the words, or he eats or he repeats. And the more the parrot eats the seeds, the faster the guy goes. Like if he couldn't have more punctuation marks to help his speech, so he literally goes like this, almost not breathing. Those were like tables with Scrabble games. Again, this is like an overview of the show. I also showed their ex-voto paintings. I'm showing here, I showed a different group over there, and I brought those images so people can understand what I did. This is an original ex-voto painting from Spain, this one. So I was very intrigued by the architecture background on those paintings because they are there, but at the same time the people, they put those saints and figures in those clouds, which kind of erases the background. So I was recreating the background of the ex-voto paintings. And also there are no messages written. Oops. And also I did this public barrier that I found in Brazil, and I wanted to reproduce. This is another aspect of my work that I didn't include in this series here, that I related to, that is related to the city itself. So this is one of them. That's a piece that I did several times, but in this time it was raining direct on the floor of the gallery. It's called It's Raining Out There, and I worked with Ogrivo. It's a sound piece that reproduces dripping water in different kind of 16 speakers, so you have this impression that you are underneath a ceiling that has a lot of holes and that are not protecting you at all. I think that's it.
Because this is a university, I thought maybe it would be interesting to talk a little bit about how you got educated and how you got into exhibitions and ended up with this very busy schedule. Because if you start in Brazil, you move to London. If you could just talk about that a little bit.
Well, first I tried to study anthropology, but we didn't have one specific school for only anthropology, so I had to study politics and sociology, and I didn't like it. I mean, it was too hard. So I gave up on studying anthropology, and then I did fine arts in my hometown, Belo Horizonte. This school is really bad, but especially like how many years ago, more than 20 years ago. It was very conservative, and we wouldn't have no idea about what was going on in America. Sometimes we would have this like Art in American magazine, and in the library once in a while we would jump, everybody would jump inside the magazine. There was no internet, everything was more difficult. And the good stuff was happening in the São Paulo biennials. That was when you could see, international artists. I think the only good thing about this school is that I kind of learned how to work in different media. So I knew how to mix colors and kind of a little bit of sculpture here and there, and I tried film, and then I would not agree with the professor, and then I would move to another area. So I was moving different kind of techniques to see if I would find a nice professor. And then, I don't know, it just happened. I don't know how it happened. It's being at the right place at the right time, having lucky, but also working hard. I got the show in São Paulo, and then there was like a group show at the beginning of the 90s, and I won a prize. That sent me, no, actually, I won a prize too that was sending me to London, but before that I got a scholarship. Just, there was this program at the time. And I got a scholarship, and I went to the Royal College of Art for 2 years. And then the whole thing started, and then I started working with Stephen Friedman Gallery, and then I was invited to different shows. Everything was very fast. And at the time, I really didn't know what I was doing. I was I was just keeping for all the interviews. I didn't know. I was just doing. I didn't have an intellectual background to say anything. So thanks to curators and writers, I kind of recognized what was my role in a way in the art world, or what was my research. So I could. You guys helped me, to go in the, I hope, the right direction.
And I guess one of the things that we did a catalog for the exhibition, which I hope you can take a look at, because it really is as close to a resonate as it exists at this moment in time. And there are some amazing essays in there that really look at very, very interesting aspects of Rivane's work. But one of the things that keeps coming up in the essays and in a lot of writing around what you do is this notion of cartography, of mapping. You keep going back to it over and over and over again. And I'm curious what that holds for you. What's the mystery in there that you're involved in?
Yeah, I think it's not only cartography, but as I said, those different systems we create to frame things and to frame the world, or to organize in a way things. And I mean, maps are fascinating. A lot of artists find the same. And I think it's time for me to stop working with maps, though. But who knows? But yeah, it comes back. I think that, like, in the same way I try to work with the participation of visitors in different ways, the cartography always comes, and then I try something different each time. The same with language and calendars too. And I like this opposition between having those systems, and then you can have nature working with those systems, and nature will be more powerful. And for nature, those systems doesn't mean anything, because, you know, a wind can carry your system in a second, or this. I just really like this contraposition between also organic material and industrial material, and how those things live together.
And your ongoing relationship with insects and slugs. I was lucky enough to be in Rivane's living room, where there is an entire ecosystem for slugs in a box. I was very, very impressed. But I know that you've also used ants that are in your domestic environment as well.
Yeah, I think the relationship with animals, I think it comes very much from my childhood. I was living in a town close to Brasilia, and it was like a farm. for 4 years, and we had all kinds of animals: turtles, monkeys, dogs, worms, I don't know, everything, insects. And my brother, who I think he was a scientist since the beginning, he was kind of doing all those experimental things with the animals, not hurting them or anything, just curious, being curious, and taking care of them too, like the monkeys. It was different, totally different relationship we had at that time with animals in Brazil. They were just around. And with ants, I mean, they were always around. I don't know. It's just they occupy, they are there. And I live in the 7th floor, and one day, like, there's a lot of ants going around. And I said, oh my God, again. And then, yeah. And, but it's just because it's unpredictable. I don't know what they might do or they might not do. For the Carnegie, it was interesting because I was working with a group of ants. And
very closely.
in my kitchen, it was kind of disgusting, but anyhow. And then, I don't know, right after the film, this group disappeared, and then it came another one. So I did that second film, but I couldn't understand, and thanks God I finished this film, because they disappeared, and came those tiny little red ants, and then I did another film with them. So it's also, the ants are, they are like a reference in the literature in Brazil. There's a famous book called Macunaíma, written by Mário de Andrade, and the main character is always, he says Brazil has two main problems, which is hungry, you say hungry? Hunger and ants. So it has also this aspect.
In this exhibition and throughout your career, at times you really decide to work with the public, to bring the public into the work itself, in very friendly, very generous ways. Where does that come from? I mean, the fact that when people come, I mean, here you have I Wish Your Wish, which we also did in New York, where there's a forensic artist and First Love, right? Where there's a forensic artist, and you describe your first love to that artist. And I mean, in New York it was very interesting because we were working primarily with two individuals, the teacher and the teacher's student. And I was down there, and they were both very, very gregarious people, and I was down there one day, and then the guy, Carrie, was like, this is driving me crazy, it's crazy. And I said, what? And he goes, it's just girls describing their first boyfriends. You know, and this is a guy who was like employed to like do sketches of perpetrators. And she said these guys didn't even perpetrate anything. But at the same time, the involvement of the people with the artist was totally a very deep and very profound experience. That was a comment. It goes back to the larger question of you and the public.
I think in an early stage of my career, I had to keep answering the relationship between my work and AUC and Alicia Clark, and gosh, this is tough because, you know, there are a lot of different influences, but okay, so yeah, Alicia was working with people, but in a much more deep psychological way, and she was not doing art anymore, she was making therapy with people. But anyhow, and Ellie had a completely different other way of dealing with the visitors and more political. And I had this heritage that people just put on top of my shoulders and I had to deal with. And but I didn't start thinking about that. It came, and I started kind of thinking of pieces that I could work in different levels of participation. So I think sometimes it's people from the museum that have to take care of something like the piece rains here with the buckets. So this is one kind of participation, and in the same room you have the circles on the floor that people step on it without noticing, so this is another kind of participation. So it's just, I think I try to have it in different levels, and also in this case of first thought, it's just offering them a platform, and in this case with a third person involved, and bringing up more, as you said, like a more psychological way, a more psychological side, because a lot of pieces are related to this, and you will see that one room at the new museum we had like the fourth floor and the third floor, and here we have two different spaces, and one is about like environment and mansion, brain and nature, and the other one is more about this human psychology. And I think this piece works well in these circumstances.
It's very interesting, maybe not for you, but for me, that when we put out the call for the essays, we talked a lot about who we wanted to write for the book and why we wanted them to write. And when the first drafts came in, it was kind of awful because everybody knew what they knew about Brazilian culture, which is probably one of the greatest gifts to come out of Latin America. It's an amazing, amazing, it's 2 centuries now of some of the most avant-garde thinking in terms of extending the boundaries of culture as we know it. But everybody was like creating this same structure, which was Ligia Clark, Ligia Pape, Elio Isica, and Rivane was like, again. And all of a sudden it was like everybody had to like get a little humility and realize that what they knew was not necessarily what the history was. And I think this other thing, which you probably heard about, the whole notion of Brazilian culture as cannibalismo. Like one of the great things about the culture is the fact that it comes into its own state of hyperactivity by devouring the cultures that are there already, so that you expand through, it's very much the kind of the old cannibal riff, you gain your power by devouring your enemy. And it's a similar thing to that. And we got kind of one of the great thinkers on cannibalismo, Paulo Herkenhoff, to do an extraordinary essay which really sets the context for, it's song, it's literature, it's the visual arts. It was amazing. One of the things that I had an enormous amount of pleasure with in the conversation and correspondence around the show with you was the original title of the show was Os
Persecutores. I don't know how to translate this to today, right?
It was like, it was like, to some degree, it conjured up levels of paranoia that I think all of us have learned over the past, 3 administrations, governmental administrations, that what is yours is not necessarily private. And that became a big part of the show. And there are two pieces that exist in the exhibition. One, the conversation, and the other, the tenant, that came from, I think, 2 of my all-time favorite films. Like they would be on the top 10 list, but the one is the Coppola movie with Gene Hackman called literally The Conversation, which has to do with a guy who is tracking and bugging this young couple, and you really don't know why, except as the film goes on, there's an increasing sense that this material is going to be used to damage them, to harm them. And the guy at the end of the film, I thought I had the film in the office and I couldn't find it when I left, but at any rate, Hackman, who is this guy who's doing all the bugging, is home in his apartment, and he plays the saxophone to relax, and he's playing the saxophone, the phone rings, he picks up the phone, and it's him playing the saxophone, and all of a sudden he realizes he's bugged, and the end of the film is just him tearing apart this apartment until finally he's pulling up the floorboards trying to find the bugs. And the phone keeps ringing, and he keeps hearing himself tearing up the apartment. So it was like truly the epitome of paranoia. The other film, totally paranoid too, Roman Polanski's The Tenant. And in The Tenant, Polanski plays an emigre in Paris, very much as he was, who moves into an apartment that had belonged to a suicide, and a particularly brutal suicide. A woman who threw herself out the window, failed to kill herself, dragged herself back inside the window, threw herself out again. And there's a moment where he believes that everybody in the building is like spying on him. And he takes, there's an enormous wardrobe, and he moves the wardrobe to find like hidey holes and whatever. And there's a soft spot on the wall. And he starts just like digging at the soft spot until he finds a human tooth. And there's no story that goes with it. I mean, it's just like, and so that becomes the bubble roaming through Rivane's new studio, but it also becomes an integral part in the conversation where it was I found it a very cruel dynamic, but it was a dynamic that the artist set up, whereby what happens with the piece called The Conversation in the show is the wall, there are bugs. The security operators come in and place X number of bugs in the wall and in the floor. And then the wall is replastered, wallpapered, carpeting and carpet pads are laid down on the floor. And then Rivane comes in with a team of prep people who are as blind as she is in terms of where this stuff is, and they start like tearing it up. And the bugs are recording them searching for the bugs. So you get a little bit of The Tooth and the Tenant, and you get a lot of Coppola's The Conversation to create this kind of amazingly, I mean, I won't determine the kind of drama you might experience in it, but it's a very, very full experience. And I think combined with First Love, it also programs an interesting kind of tension into First Love, this whole kind of memory and forgetting going on. Okay, this is a lot of description from me. Let me move back to you. In terms of these new pieces, which in a way start with the Nightingale floor, what kind of motivation do you have in terms of looking at this kind of psychological aspect of present-day life?
I think it comes from, I wanted to deal with fear, and I mean, I've been working with organic materials, since so many years. And one day somebody asked me, but what about this bubble? This bubble, the first one, it never exploded. What does it represent to you? And then I started to think about it, and in a way I think it has to do with maybe life in Brazil, that it's unpredictable. It's you cannot count with, we cross the street, something can happen. It's just that, I don't know, life, it has this kind of insecure, insecure life. You don't have a secure life in Brazil at all, so I think it starts from this, and when living in Europe for a while, you have this contrast more and more, and I think I'm trying to deal with this position you have in Brazil, like having fear all the time, and you cannot go out during the night. It's all about this, being insecure, but nobody really notices because we get used. It's kind of normal that someone is kidnapped here and there. Nobody questions. Nobody, just nobody thinks. The government is totally corrupt, and it's just learn how to deal with kind of fragile situation, and I think it comes from there. And I want to, I wanted to, for the show, I wanted to ask like for the fear of people in Brazil, but then I can't be that direct in my work, so it always goes to those kind of different way of formalizing or bringing up some ideas that are not much like literal to deal with those subjects, but I just wanted to be more clear in this subject, I think.
Does having 2 young children change the way you are thinking about your own?
I became more, how do you say this, fear of
anxious.
I have more fear than I had before. Yeah, I think it changed. You are responsible for them, and you have to think about them all the time, and you need to be there at the same time. So you have to be more careful for them, but also for yourself. It's a weird thing. At the same time, you have to think that life it's just like this. It can disappear, and I don't know. It's just you need to be prepared. So I think sometimes my old work is just about to prepare that one day things can go up. But it's not right. It's just that my daughter hurt herself. I think it's also the clocks are pretty much like this. I was talking to Paul Heckenhoff, and he said to me, I'm very impressed about the clocks because it's just about the human condition. One day this clock will just not work anymore. And he was not talking about the zeros. He was just talking, he was talking about the zeros and this repetition and everything. And when I did the clocks, I was breastfeeding my daughter, and I was looking to the clock, and this breastfeeding was like forever, and I said, oh my God, this time's not passing on. And at the same time, and then when I gave the title, A Day Like Any Other, for the clocks, I said, I'm here, but it could be that I have an accident and things change in a second. Then a day like any other wouldn't be a day like any other. It would be another day, completely different from the day before. But on the other hand, it's a day like any other for many other people. It has this contradiction, I think.
The piece that we're referring to, A Day Like Any Other, we took the title of the exhibition from that piece, but it's the clocks. As you go around the campus, and there's a list, right, of where they are. They're in private spaces, public spaces, so there are 24 clocks, and they're all ticking, and they're all telling you kind of nothing, which is a very profound way of making another statement. We've taken up an hour, wow, an hour and 5 minutes. We're happy to entertain questions.
You wanted to engage with the public? Because
first one.
The first piece you made, you last year, went to a page. That's a soft opera.
No, actually, yeah, it could be. I think it was suspended landscape, actually. Yeah. No, yeah, I think it was one piece that I showed in a gallery that it was a sort of landscape made out of empty garlic shells hanging from how? Can you explain that?
They were husks of garlic that were suspended on like a very, very, very thin string, and were just like, I mean, a quarter of an inch above the floor. So it was like walking through an environment.
The visitors, they would walk around this landscape, and it would move according to the passage of, when you pass, you have this wind behind you, so the whole landscape would move in a very gentle way. So I think it was like this non-participatory, participatory piece that people don't really realize. And the second one was that one, the dirty room and the São Paulo, and I think it was the same. People wouldn't notice until the thing was completely dirt, and then walking in circles the same. So I think progressively I started working more and more, and then really dealing with people in a more direct way.
There's sort of a follow-up. Are you ever disappointed by some of these, by any of the outside kind of influences or instability built into your projects?
I'm sorry.
Are you ever disappointed, or have you ever felt maybe a piece was unsuccessful because of some of the outside influence that you allowed into your work?
You know, like the visitors?
No, I'm asking if, for instance, you feel like the bugs or the people or the weather, you're disappointed with their influence. You felt like a piece maybe doesn't work because of something that happened.
You mean like chance when you're...
Right, or the piece with the sort of comics pieces where you allow the public to draw or write. Are you ever disappointed by what people write or draw?
I'm always surprised, and I'm always thankful because I find it's really extraordinary. I mean, people are really interesting, and I'm thankful to visitors in general. I never had problems. I mean, it's to deal with some participatory in terms of like the typewriters in Venice. I had a problem the first week. I was crying like hell because the machines didn't resist. So I was kind of, I learned, the things have to survive to 1,000 of people typing them frenetically. So in this sense, for a while I was kind of not disappointed but tired that the materials would behave in a way that I didn't want to. And every time I do a piece, and this is very tiring for me because I have to learn how materials behave in general. So I have to complain about materials. There is this song, I like this pop, it's from a rock band in Belo Horizonte, says, every work of art would be perfect apart from the imperfection of the material, the used material. And I suffer from this material syndrome a lot, but regarding people and also nature, I'm there for it. I'm playing with chance and control it, and trying to control at the same time. So I established the rules, but I accepted the weather, whatever.
Do you sort of see the ants as like a participant in your projects, or a material?
They are participants.
Because I sort of see them as parallel to human being interaction too. It's on a different scale.
Yeah, no, they are my, how do you say this, my casting, kind of, yeah.
There is no casting couch, though.
agency that in those two works, and whether you see a similarity there in the ex-votos that you were making the paintings, right? Rather than in the position, in a sense, of an artist who would traditionally be commissioned to make a painting, to make someone else's vision or memory. And on the other hand, the forensic artist is creating a similar sort of image, a memory, or a wish. I wondered if you saw a relationship between them.
I'm not sure if I understood regarding the ex-votos. Do you mean that I could have commissioned somebody to paint the ex-votos? Yes and no. Maybe in Mexico City, but not in Brazil.
No?
No, there are a lot of ex-voto paintings in Brazil, but since when photography came, the painting was gone. It didn't survive. So if you go to some churches, you find still the tridimensional, like the arms and things made out of wax. This still exists. But the paintings, they don't paint anymore. They just put a photograph of whatever and write. So I had to face painting for the first time in my life because I really wanted to do this. And what's interesting for me, there's this whole floor is strangely connected. For me, everything is clear in a way, but I think it's not that easy, I think, for everybody to do those kind of connections. Like if you have the first floor, it's this person remembering of something. It could fill up what is missing in ex-voto paintings. I mean, the ex-votos usually they have a figure. The figure is not there, so it can be represented by the faces on the first floor of drawings, but also the story. So it wasn't necessary to have the text on the ex-voto paintings, not even the representation. I know you know it's hard because if you don't know what an ex-voto painting is, it becomes more difficult to put things together. But in a different way, in a more formal way, the ex-voto paintings are very much connected to the conversation piece, especially like the floor and the walls, and
the disappeared activity.
Yes, and it's like I was very surprised. It's not something that I couldn't foresee or calculate beforehand, but I was so happy when we did the first time the conversation at the new museum because it was an idea. It was totally risky. It couldn't work out. And so when I realized that the conversation was the tridimensional ex-voto painting in front of me, that was like was a nice surprise. So and also the bubble, the soul bubble crosses this house where it goes in every kind of room with a different floor. It's so much connected with the ex-votos, and the bubble can also be like a figure for the ex-voto paintings. All of these kind of things connected. I'm not sure I answered your question though.
In the back.
I'm wondering if you've been able to observe how people participating with your work varies depending on the exhibition venue, whether it be more institutional or more public versus private. And I'm wondering if you adapt your work or your ideas according to the venue where they're exhibited.
Does the venue change the nature of the work? In other words, if it's a public venue or a more academic venue, does do the way they work change? In terms of, you mean audience, yeah?
Yeah, specifically in regards to participation in your work.
I don't know. A good question, but I think those works were never really exposed to a more, apart from biennials that they have like a more mixed kind of people and also more people. It changed. I think it changed. There's one nice example, I would say, like with the typewriter drawings. I showed in Venice, and then it was shown in the São Paulo Biennial, the last one, which was a very kind of disastrous, political, anti-biennial, and yeah, the curators, there was a crisis inside the biennial institution. So the curators decided to leave the second floor of this huge Nehemiah's building empty. And so the typewriters became like a platform for kind of a manifestation. People were angry and saying anti-biennial, anyhow, it was less ludic, to say, playful than Venice. So it became a kind of a political way of expression themselves in the public. So that was interesting, and also it changed what people want to say, and I don't know, maybe it was a coincidence, but there were like, in Venice there was not a pornographic message, and in Brazil I could find like 20 pornographic drawings, and I said, oh my goodness, oh my country. But yeah, I guess it changed from country to country, from culture to culture.
I think there are also external forces that play into it as well. In New York, the press was all over First Love. And it started out with one television station coming in, and this kind of chipmunky debutante newscaster like, "Hi, how are you, Carrie? Can I sit down and describe my first love to you?" And it was like, and it like hit the news, and you'd think, well, that's the end of that. She's destroyed that. But every station, one after another, came back and wanted the same experience. So we very quickly had to like put out on the website, book an appointment. So then it started like, it changed because you needed to get people in a line to have it so that it wasn't a mess. And the same thing happened with the ribbons, and I wish your wish. The first level of the museum is free, and at a certain point, people were like parking, double parking outside, running in, like going through the wishes, getting the wishes, and then you'd see 2 weeks later, you'd see them on the beach in Sagaponic or something, and then it was like, oh, they wanted to tie them on their ankles, that began. So, I think this life has a strange way of structuring multiple realities all at the same time, and they do affect the context that people are receiving the work in.
Yeah, it just happened, I just remember this, in Malmo now, I did this gigantic 40 meters piece, the biggest piece I've ever done, but I had another piece, which was just a dripping of water on the floor. And then the next day, the radio station was there, and they said, oh, that's a 40 meters piece. No, they were like, it was a big mess, because what happened, there was an exhibition with Hans Peter Feldman during the winter. And it happened that the snow was in this modernistic, the roof. And it started dripping on top of one of Hans Peter Feldman's piece. So my dripping sound piece became completely, immediately political, and an critic institution, and the radio was there, so everybody was just talking about this dripping and how to fix the roof, and how this critic, I know that I was doing institutional critique, and I was kind of trying to just defend the curator, saying, oh my goodness, I hope I'm not destroying your whole here in this museum. He said, no, it's been there for a while. He said, also, I hope you guys can fix the mayor can fix this roof. But it's like this, I would say.
Yes.
I was thinking about what you said about we don't usually observe where we're walking unless I think we have an artistic eye. In Rio, it's impossible not to be aware of where you're walking because of the waving sidewalks, the black and white, which create an indelible image. Why was it considered necessary to embellish a physically breathtakingly beautiful city with that? Can you tell me about the origin of the sidewalks, the origin of the black and white that go all along the front?
I don't think you can. She's basically asking about the origin of the famous rhythm of the sidewalk.
The arch?
The origin. The beginning, the reason for it.
And the sidewalk
Yeah.
by Boulevard?
Yeah.
I don't know, Boulevard did this. He was a
Landscape architect.
He was a landscape architect and an architect, and he was commissioned to do a project for the coast.
Along the beach.
Along the beach, so he did this, and he did different other projects too, beautiful ones.
Yes.
I mean, Bourret Marx and Niemeyer both started out at basically the same point in time in Brazil, and one of the standout features in Belo Horizonte is their first big job was to create this lake surrounded by a chapel, a casino, a club, which is really quite remarkable to this day, and that was Rivane showed the interior of the casino with the piece with the stair coming down. Exquisite building.
No, I think it's when you enter an exhibition, usually you don't look to the floor, you look up to the walls. So the walls are the main, destination. Not even the air for sculptures, like the walls, not the ceiling, not the floor. I usually walk looking down to the floor. A lot of holes too.
Anyone else?
I want to thank you both for a great dialogue. So